So what the flat earth thing brings up questions certain fundamental things in your reality. For example, this is the one that broke it down for me, and I bet you it's going to break it down for you. Observations that can't be made on a 25,000 mile ball circumference Earth. Certain observations can't be made. Where I live on Kauai, on a clear day I can see Oahu. Oahu is 70 miles away. That's 1 degree of the Earth's curvature. The Earth's curvature drops away from you at 8 inches times the distance in miles squared. So, for example, at 9 miles, that's 54 feet. But as soon as you get to 30 miles, that's 600 feet. By the time it's 70 miles, it's 1,187 meters. Meters. So that means the bulge should come up in front of you, and I should see from Kauai only the tops of the mountains of Oahu. You don't see that. You see it all the way down to the coast. You see the whole island. Not possible on the model that we've been sold. That's the one that broke it down for me. Optically, it's one of the things you have to deal with. Optically, the world's flat. Whatever other than optic, you have to figure that out. But the water also corresponds to optical flatness, too. The water sits flat. Your eyesight sits flat. You see it optically flat. You can get any bit of optical equipment, like this guy had a great camera up here. That camera can prove to you conclusively that when a ship goes over the horizon, it never went over a curve, because all you have to do is dial it in, it's still there. It doesn't go over a horizon. So the horizon is just going outside of your eye distance. So part of this whole thing about how we ended up with the whole ball Earth theory is that we're super arrogant about our eyesight. The idea of being able to see a star that's 482 quadrillion miles away is so completely ridiculous. It is so bad. I just had to let that one go. It's like 482 quadrillion miles. No, sorry, your theory is wrong. We're not buying it. We're not believing it. All theories to test if the Earth is moving or the heavens are moving indicate the heavens move, Earth doesn't move. Foucault's pendulum that indicates the Earth's moving, it switches direction during an eclipse. Does that mean the Earth switched direction? Just stuff like this are just sold to us. You have to dig it apart. As soon as you have an observation, I'm 30 miles away from the international airport in Iceland. I'm across the water. I can see it. It's 30 miles away. It's 50 miles driving. So on my phone, I can see it's 30 miles away. I can see the airport. There it is. Should be behind 600 feet of curvature. It's behind 0 feet of curvature. You can't explain this stuff with a 25,000 mile ball Earth. Now then what happens is as you dig into this, you start to go, well, what about NASA? What about these pictures we've seen? Now, as Americans, I've been doing this, and we did this in Costa Rica. We spent $3.3 trillion on NASA. That's what we're spending on this garbage. What do we get? We get 12 pictures of the Earth from space. When you dig into those pictures, they're not real pictures. They don't have the altitude to get the shot, so they're composites, where they've been positioned together under framework that magnifies it. So they got a little picture going snap, 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 and they put that together into a bigger picture. It's called a composite. That's what all those images are. Look into it by their own admission. You can't get the altitude to take the shot. It's been 60 years. We should have the altitude to take the shot. Or turn that Hubble telescope around and face it towards the Earth, and let's watch the Earth spin in real time. And watch I want to know about the weather on the ball Earth that we're supposedly spinning around in a ball. I want to see the weather patterns from a supposed satellite that's up there, instead of composite images that are taken from close up that are pieced together to make it look like it's from far away. They're constructed. Then you start to dig into, well, who's behind all this stuff? What is this? Why do we get this garbage? And that's when you really hit the rabbit hole. That's when you really dig in. But the thing that's so important is your own observations have to corroborate all of it. If your observation doesn't correlate to their system, guess what's wrong? You or them. They sold you, they put this thing in front of you in school the first day. You're 5 years old, you're in kindergarten. What do they put in front of you? They put in a globe and a Mercator projection of the Earth with Greenland's like bigger than Africa. Remember that map? Are these accurate? Is any map accurate? Is Google Earth accurate? Every cartographer will tell you that no map is accurate. Everything is out of whack by about 5 to 10%. Easy. So we could take other maps and say this is the Earth or that's the Earth. The way that NASA puts all the satellite imagery into a composite image is a teardrop shape like that, poles at the top and bottom. That's how they do it. Maybe there's something to the way they're doing that. Why are they using that shape? It's a teardrop shape, two teardrops meeting each other, so at the tops are points. If the Earth doesn't move, then what? Then the heavens move. Here's an observation. You got to make it. You got to get this observation yourself and come to deal with it. Because when you put all of this together, you realize that we're in a rational, irrational situation. The sun's motion and the sun's timing system can't be exactly correlated precisely with the moon's. The moon loses 12% on the sun every day. The stars lose 1% against the sun every day. So the sun's tick back 1% each day. 360 is a whole turnaround, but we have 365 days. When you start putting the sun's motion, the moon's motion, and the star's motion together, it's irrational. They don't make sense. So you end up with Mayan calendars is trying to get an accurate of where we're going into the future, because these three clocks don't match up with each other. That indicates intelligence. That indicates that we're in a realm, not a planet. We're in a realm of some sort. Here's another observation. This one took me a while to understand this. I've been observing it, something you want to take in. As you get higher up in the atmosphere, the Earth at 20,000 feet should begin to pull away from you if we're on a 25,000-mile ball circumference Earth, which means you should start to see the curvature, and you should be able to optically measure it by snapping it to a grid in your camera. I haven't been able to make that observation. That's why the whole thing broke down on me. Here's what's interesting. Our world, we're supposed to be scientific. We're supposed to use the scientific method. That's what we're taught. If you use the scientific method, eventually you run into this. You can't question that. That's not questionable. That's just a fact. No. We want to use the scientific method to evaluate this supposed fact. No. You can't do that because that's a fact. Any field you run into, you'll find these suppositions. They're built into it. So we're going to question the supposition that we're on a curved surface. We'll question it optically with that camera right there. In order to question it optically, we have to put the camera lens. We can't make a mistake and think that the lens of that camera is not going to affect our outcome, because it will. The lens of your eye also affects the outcome. So that means the horizon has to be exactly at eye level, and the horizon of your camera and the reticle at the center of the lens needs to snap to flat horizon right there. Then we go out to a peninsula right on the sea. You snap to flat horizon on a reticle in the middle of your camera, and then you swing it to left and right, 30 to 40 miles that way or that way. That should drop off 600 feet on the edges. You should be able to detect some curvature with your camera. We are always surrounded our whole lives, and always have been, by a straight line that runs around us with no curvature around it. There's no optical curvature. Whatever that means for you, it's an observation you have to make. The observation we're told we should make is 8 inches times the distance in miles squared. That's the fall off of the ball Earth. You determine if that's something you observe. And when you stop observing that, then you still got to start questioning what is going on here. Because it's not fitting the model that we're sold, that we're on a ball, Mars is a ball, Venus is a ball, the sun's a ball, and we're going around that ball. Southern hemisphere, anybody can prove this. You can take any data out you like, and it's like that on the internet. Same latitude, southern hemisphere is different from the northern hemisphere. Different sun movement. The sun moves faster in the southern hemisphere than in the northern. There's no twilight in the southern hemisphere. There's no twilight in New Zealand. But as the summer progresses in the northern hemisphere, we have a twilight. The sun's still out at 9 or 10 p.m. The further north you are, 11 p.m., that sun is still visible. A little bit in the sky, twilight. Not so in the southern hemisphere. That can't be rectified on a symmetrical ball. It indicates that the sun moves and we don't. As far as I'm concerned, my study of this, heliocentric model is a nightmare, complete garbage. Think about that. But then I'll question basic assumptions, which our system won't. It doesn't want that. It wants you to be unable to question anything or any basic assumption, so that we get sold whatever garbage sticks, and that becomes our ball model. I know we got Star Wars, I know we got Star Trek. That doesn't mean it's real. Those are like movies, TV shows. It's not real. What is real? Rational, irrational, both at the same time. The Earth you move on is irrational. I defy anybody to come up with the answer to this riddle. You want to take a map and see if you can map this out? take your flight from, and you're going to map this using just flight data, not given distances. So the flight data indicates it's a 4.5-hour flight from Los Angeles to Honolulu. That's an average. You take the 4.5-hour flight to Honolulu from Los Angeles. Honolulu, you fly to Taiwan. That's a, whatever, 9.5-hour flight, whatever that is, 10 hours. Just flight time only. You factor out wind direction, dominant wind direction. Then you map your way all the way around the whole world. Then you try to take all that data and put it into a grid and make it make sense. You don't need data that they give you. You can do it all by flight times and given airports and their distance from each other. We did that. What it indicates is an irrational object. It doesn't indicate a ball. It doesn't indicate a flat surface. It indicates a number of possibilities of what the Earth really is, its shape. But it's not going to fit a perfect Google Earth, that's for sure. Why don't airports, when you land one way, take into account the Earth spinning or moving like you're landing on an asteroid? Pilots don't take that into account ever. The direction of the airport is there's only one thing that determines it, and that's the dominant wind direction. Not any movement. If it's a north-south runway and you're trying to land on it, the Earth's supposedly spinning from the east to the west, so it's moving on you. And as you come down and you're up in the angular velocity of the atmosphere, your angular velocity from the Earth changed, so you have to then land on an asteroid, a moving target. No such calculations are ever made, ever. You talk to any pilot. A pilot uses its attitude adjustment, which is the gyroscope in the middle. It's the ball with that snaps to flat horizon. I had the top military pilot from Dubai. I said, your attitude snaps to flat horizon. Explain that for me. So there's only one way to explain it, and that is we're not flying over a curved surface. He was trained since he was 7 years old by the British military to fly at 1 meter above the ground in a jet. 1 meter above the ground in a jet. If the Earth is curving at all and you're not snapped to flat horizon, if you go even a bit down, you're dead in a millisecond. If you go up, you're flying into outer space. Every plane should fly into outer space if, in fact, that attitude is going around a ball. But it snaps to flat horizon because the horizon doesn't actually move up on you or down. Optically, it's flat, and it's also how you fly it, too. So that's evidence to me. And that evidence eventually starts to break it down for you. All of this stuff that you'll hear, people will go, it's flat. Nope, you're just going to get us into another trap, just like the ball got us into a trap. We have evidence. So what we say is, as far as we know now, as far as we know, it's this. As far as we know, it's that. Here's our observations. They lead to this. Copernicus's third observation is left out of history books. What he said, in order to have the heliocentric model and the Earth going around it, is that the rotations of the planets and the sun counter-rotate against the Earth, so we don't appear to notice any change in movement. They just left that one out. We never heard about that one. So instead we got, oh no, the stars don't move because they're 482 quadrillion miles away, or 3.8 trillion miles away. How about they move and we don't move? Feel into that one. Our grid systems, our latitude and longitude is based on the sun and the North Star. Maybe that isn't the top of the world. That's just where the North Star is. When the North Star is directly above you, you're at the North Pole. Does that mean you're at the top of the world? It just means you're following some star chart pattern. May not necessarily have anything to do with what's going on down here. Very good term that I've dug out of this stuff is the pole of inaccessibility. Anybody ever heard of that? The coldest place in Antarctica, the hardest place to reach, a place that's never been reached from two directions at once. You can only go into it one way and then back out the other way, which ought to tell you something. You go back out the way you came. You go in one way, you have to go back out the way you came. It's called the pole of inaccessibility. In the South Pole, it's the coldest place on Earth, the most difficult place on Earth to reach. In the North Pole, it's not the northern region. It's not the North Pole. It's above Alaska and Russia. It's above the Bering Strait. Straight up there at 85 degrees latitude above the Bering Strait is the coldest and most difficult spot to reach in the northern part of the world. What does this mean? Something to investigate, more questions. One other thing I want to say is about the symmetry of the world. In the northern hemisphere, the tree line ends at the 74th parallel. In the southern, the 56th parallel. Comparing the flora and fauna of Iceland, for example, which is from 62 to 66 degrees of latitude, with 62 to 66 degrees of latitude in the Antarctic Peninsula, that doesn't correlate. They don't match each other, not in any way, not even in the time that the sun rises and sets, in equivalent times of the year. It indicates we're not on a ball, a perfect symmetrical ball going around. So that's more a bit of evidence that I can correlate myself. I can make those observations, and then I can come to conclusions. That's where we're at with all this stuff. Do we know anything? No. As far as we know now, we think it's this, but then we have this evidence too. We need to look at all the evidence because the evidence is going to conflict.